So I really had to think long and hard about all this information and analyze why I was so influential in the beginning of the J world and why it petered out. And it's exactly to the formula. Because in the beginning of the whole J world, I was still hot. I was still sexual. I still had the old programming of youth and vitality and trying to remedy away pain and suffering. And so I became a hit back in 2018, 2017, 2018. And then also in 2019, 2020, because of the whole pandemic and of course the anti-V, all the activism. And then over time, as I was experiencing the pain and suffering that I did not remedy away, I looked crazy, was hawking out loogies and all that stuff. People became disenchanted. They were disgusted. People became they lost interest in the J world. They lost interest in the evolution. They lost interest and applied characterizations to what I was doing. That was all part of the programming out there in society. When you're trying to remedy away pain and suffering, when you're not supposed to change. And since I was changing, and I was not remedying away pain and suffering, and I was looking quite monstrous at certain times, the programming is to be disenchanted and to think the person is ugly or selling disease and all that stuff. And even though they might be correct, because when you do face those demons of disease and why it is you have food intolerances, eventually the byproduct will be relative symmetry and relative balance. But it was not the intention. You see, people want the intention to look beautiful without earning it, to look relatively balanced without really earning it. And so then they demonize anyone who's willing to go through the fire to get through relative equilibrium with a byproduct of relative balance. And so the last 7 years was exposing the medicine industry. Now, somebody asked a question on my Facebook when I said medicine is a sin against life. Medicine is a sin against humanity. And they're like, are you Catholic? What's your religion? I looked at their Facebook and they're from the Hebrew side of it. And you know, the Hebrews also practice alchemy and medicine, natural or holistic or allopathic. Though some people in the Hebrew world, as well as the right-wing Christian or all the different religions out there, energy healing people think that their medicine is much better than the Rockefeller medicine, when actually it's the same thing. So they were thinking I was Catholic because I mentioned the word sin. Sin is not just a Catholic terminology. Sin is something that is what you could perceive as going against life. Again, everyone has their perception, their meaning of what goes against life. So again, you'd have to figure out what world they're coming from before you understand their perception of what sin is. But when you think about the definition of sin, it is something that is amoral, that violates the sanctity of life. But even though it's a medicine or a misdemeanor, of course, felonies are much more aggressive in the justice system than misdemeanors. And so people can get away with misdemeanors versus the felonies. However, so many misdemeanors could eventually equal a felony at some point. But little mini sins, right? That's what medicine is, a mini sin against life, is not so bad. But it's all relative to what it is that you are trying to remedy away and take away life from. And so then in a slower frequency environment with the landscape accepting a little bit of sin, no one blinks an eye until the environment changes, the landscape changes, and those little sins turn into huge sins that the whole mutually assured destruction, the counterattacks, when the body's trying to push out stuff, and that's called life, and the person takes a remedy or medicine to stop the body from pushing that life out, then you have the action of the body developing opposing forces, which is cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and autoimmune disorders. And then you need to have more medicine that the counterattacks against the body trying to push out the opposing forces become so astronomically deadly that it is mutually assured destruction. It is all out annihilation. That's what diet suddenly is. That's what the morgue is that the person counterattacked the body trying to release the demon, so to speak, and the body didn't have any more fight in it to try to save itself left, and then people die suddenly. And so when you are selling those types of counterattacks against the body trying to release the demons, you got to be beautiful. You got to be gorgeous, even ugly. You got to have proven that you've beaten some kind of cancer diagnosis in the past. Because no one wants to hear about me and my PMS, right? It's not recognized as something deadly. Oh, you have PMS? Oh, poor fucking you. Go take a medication. Stay off the coffee. Work through it. That's not suffering. And so when you have implied that you beat cancer somewhere, and you're aesthetically appealing, and you're also recommending the deadly diets and the protocols that are aggressive against the life, medicine, mini sins turn into major sin, major counterattacks of mutually assured destruction, then you have appeased the system's intentions of you selling death and destruction to your friends and family. And it's socially acceptable. So as long as you play the part, you look the part. And you could be completely ugly, according to social mores, or you could be completely gorgeous. Or you could be selling something because you're a savior in the politics world, in the religious world, in the science world. And so then even your word carries weight when you have beaten what the body was trying to do, is release the demons. Okay? And you have had to employ the mercenaries of the system to carve out the opposing forces because you kept trapping them in your body because you didn't want to feel the body release. You didn't want the body to release. And so you took medicine. You took sin against your body. And that's not just a Catholic concept. That is a Rosicrucian concept of all the religions and spiritual healers out there. Sin is sin. You can read the 7 deadly sins. And just because you're not Catholic doesn't mean that you don't practice small sins and large sins. What is it? Some people have discrimination against how people sin, whatever. My sin is better than your sin. Why would any sin be at all acknowledged? And so then people that are in those worlds where they claim that they're better than somebody else in their religion, that they don't sin at all, and they're taking medicine, they're taking natural medicine, remedies, they're taking holistic remedies, medicine. They're taking allopathic medicine. And then what happens is then when, then you're like, well, I won't take any more medicine, but they have already conditioned their body not to release. Whether they're staying away from food, lest they might feel something, or they're bringing in certain foods so they can feel something, but they don't want to feel something. If you haven't conditioned your body to deal with the pain and suffering of disease, of the body trying to push out, and you helping the body push out without destroying it, then you just arbitrarily stay away from natural or holistic or allopathic medicine won't do shit for you because you haven't embraced the other side of it. You only half-ass that situation, which is most people out there. They only half-ass situations that they want to pick and choose what would be socially and religiously and politically acceptable in their world. And so then, you know, I was wondering, like, in my head, well, why am I not very influential? Oh, I know why, because I'm not hot and sexual. Because I don't look completely ugly selling depression, showing you, oh God, I have this disease. Please feel sorry for me. And I'm not completely beautiful and gorgeous and say I beat cancer. And here's my protocol on beating cancer. And then I'm not like, you know, I don't know. I don't have any kids. I can't use my kids as props to legitimize and give me credibility, used as a tool. And then, of course, you know, there's so many other parameters that I will go over in a minute of why I'm not very influential. I'm not an old sage. I'm not some hot and sexual person. And I don't have kids. And I didn't beat cancer because PMDD or PMS is not even recognizable to some people. Because some women have never experienced that, think that's just something in the person's head. They're mentally ill. They need to go on some kind of antipsychotic or something. You know how many times women and men in the last 7 years have said that I was mentally ill, said that I was unhealthy, full of disease, and I would say they were all fucking right, and I was in the process of releasing all that bullshit. So now that I'm not mentally ill anymore, right? I'm not constantly hawking up loogies, constantly sounding like I'm some, you know, trans whatever, sounding like a deep voice, and I'm not constantly sick, then they're like, well, why should we listen to you, Jillian? You're not sick. You're not fighting some disease. You're not hot and sexual. You don't have any children. And you're not a savior. You're not an ugly or a pretty savior in the anti-everything world. And you're not in religion. You're not selling God to anyone. You're not selling praise this and praise that to other people. And you're not demonizing Klaus Schwab's or Bill Gates. And so when you don't fit in any of those categories of death and destruction and biases and beauty and deadly culture of botox and plastic surgery and food mitigation diets, no one's going to fucking listen to you. Because people innately want to pass away. And they want the easiest way out as possible. The most pain-free way out as possible. I get it. That's why I'm not very influential. And that's pretty sober. That's a pretty sobering thought. But it actually is a pretty awesome thought because it means that the agenda will still be what it is for most people out there. That I will not get in the way of what the system is trying to do. I will not get in the way of it at all. Because most people are so superficial. And they have 1 billion children. They have businesses to run. They want to be influential. They only listen to pleasure and paradise and sexuality. They've been programmed for that. And they make money from it. So why would they? Why would they be like, okay, I'm going to walk away from it all and save myself with absolutely no fanfare. No one saying, good job. You know how hard it is not to crave validation from your Facebook and friends and family? You know how difficult that is to walk away from it all? Oh, it's fucking difficult. And so then what's the thing to do then if you're not wanting everyone to love you? And then you're like, well, shit, fucking hate me then. Fine, everybody fucking hate me. I'll just say whatever the fuck I'm going to say. And then you realize that's probably the best thing that's gonna save you is when you don't have people hanging on your every word. When you don't have the validation, the addiction to love and acceptance and all that. When you don't have to cater to friends and family and being afraid to offend them. When you finally can say whatever it is you need to say without catering to one kind of audience or another. Because I will tell you, even those that were saying, oh, Jillian, you're so beautiful, right? When I posted that reel of time passages of what I used to look like, where I'm not hot anymore. I was hot, and I'm not hot anymore. And people are like, oh, you're still beautiful. I never said I wasn't beautiful. Why would you assume that when I say I'm not hot, that you have to go and make me feel good? I wasn't even feeling bad. Well, why would you assume that, oh, because you're trying to now keep within the paradigm in your world, that you're still hot even though you're over 50, that you're still beautiful, even when you don't fit within those standards of beauty in our society, which you know, when you're being dubbed ugly or beautiful, regardless, that's the system trying to bully you into a standard of beauty, that even being ugly does not fit within the standard of beauty. And so people lie to you and say that you're beautiful even though you don't fit within those standards of beauty. And I wasn't trying to fish for compliments, but people do. They do it to themselves. They assume that you're fishing for compliments. So they project what they're doing. And then I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, so I'm just trying to be polite and be like, okay, thanks. Laugh out loud, thanks. But that's not what how I wanted to respond to it. I couldn't attack them because they're coming from a place of goodness. They weren't trying to attack me. And I understand that. That's why I didn't come off as like, would you stop saying I'm pretty? But I finally did, but I erased all the comments because I didn't want anyone to feel embarrassed for how they would naturally respond to anyone that they thought was feeling bad and sorry for themselves. And I said, you know what, when you are complimenting men or women on their looks, you are holding them to a standard of death and destruction, and especially children. People say, oh, look, your beautiful child. Oh, look, your children are so beautiful. Which means that they cannot be anything other than the standard of what is beautiful in our society. And then you see those beauty standards in Hollywood, in politics, in science, all over, everywhere. And you see what kids are put out there as a piece to sell something. You see these kids are used in the anti-everything world. This is the standard of beauty, is this really skinny child who is starving, who is food intolerant to everything. And so that becomes the standard of beauty and acceptance, is when a child is starving and deficient. And so then all these mothers are trying to then now, they're trying to assimilate and uphold those standards of beauty within their kids. No, kids are not either beautiful, they're not ugly. Kids are rising up to the level of incompetence of their family. Oh, Jillian, that's so horrible to say. Well, because how many people out there in families that have dead grandmothers, dead grandfathers, people who are fighting disease, that they're in the activist groups promoting gluten-free everything, promoting sugar-free everything, salt-free everything, promoting everything-free everything. You think your kids are going to have a chance when the mother and the father have zero tolerance for their environment? So the kids are going to be rising up to the level of the incompetence of their family. No different than people get promoted to the incompetence, to the level of the incompetence of that company. Because you try to rise above, they'll knock you down to size. You try to say, oh, you don't have to be gluten intolerant. But it does take work to cough, sneeze, and blow your nose. People say, oh, I can't drink milk because it causes so much phlegm. Well, then cough it out. What do you think the phlegm is? It's a carrier force of the things that are diseased in you being carried out through the mechanism of your upper immune system. But you can't tell someone that. And so that child and that whole family will rise up to the level of the incompetence of that whole family, that whole group, that whole politics, religion, science, dogma. And so that is what these children are being geared for, is to rise to the level of incompetence of their environment. All right, I'm going to read you what this person is saying. So I said, I've been trying to say this for a long time. I couldn't find the words, and I found the words. What if we erase the words beautiful and ugly out of your vocabulary? Calling women beautiful or ugly is an insult to women and men all over the world because you're setting impossible standards even with your compliments. Okay? And then what if we stopped complimenting women? What if you stopped insulting them? Then we can talk honestly about actual health and wellness contributing to longevity that doesn't cater to standards of beauty that are impossible. Symmetry in beauty is a byproduct, not something as a target or an intention. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And something about beauty or something about brains and everything. And then this person wrote, and I'm going to delete the comment because I don't want to go back and forth with this, but she goes, even the sadder part to me is when you realize your brain goes too. Yeah, some people's brains, not everyone's brains. But if you choose to cater to beauty and sexuality and pain-free everything, yeah, your brain's going to fucking go. And so then you'll project that onto the population. So she goes, the even sadder part to me is when you realize the brain goes too. Not necessarily. That's her projecting that her brain is going because of whatever it is that she's dealing with. Then you start to ponder on mortality and the spark of life morphing into something completely different than our suits of meat. The only thing that scares me about death these days is what if I don't remember? I need to remember. And I said, you are projecting. The brain does not have to go. But if you project that, that is you, not me. I'm not going back and forth with this person because people are suffering and you can't tell them anything when they're in it. When they have already professed that they are going to go, that they are on their way out the door, you can't talk them out of it. But they will counter you in nice, polite ways and even thoughtful ways because that's the world that they're coming from. And so let me just go from the top to the bottom. Because we need to address this. If I was influential enough for everyone or most people to get my thought process, I would be legitimately beautiful and gorgeous and sexual. Because you would listen to me. You would hang on to my every word and do what I'm doing. And you would even tell your friends. I would go viral as the new savior. Given I'm not influential in most people's worlds, it means I'm neither beautiful or gorgeous. You are implying that I'm ugly in today's standards of beauty. Stop lying to me. People harm themselves in the name of listening to someone who is beautiful. Plastic surgery and botox, to be exact. Staying away from food to be skinny and taking antibiotics and all the remedies and supplements. And since you were told my information is harmful and I'm not beautiful according to today's standards, you're avoiding the hell out of me and countering me even politely. You're only listening to the beautiful people and the ugly saviors trying to save you. Or you're listening to ex-cancer patients who said they beat cancer using whatever protocol that is out there, and that just so happens to look aesthetically appealing. And they just so happen to look aesthetically appealing. So those that were back in the holistic world, back when I was doing the whole J world, and you had all those person's name, Tony beat cancer, Christopher beat cancer, Eloise beat cancer. And they're hot and they're sexual doing the yoga poses and they're in their industries and they're doing their thing and they're back on the job and saying, hey, I beat cancer and this is what I did. And they list a whole list of stuff that what they've done to beat cancer. And they're all antibiotic. And maybe that isn't appropriate for somebody else. And even then, if you beat cancer, there is no saying where it actually originated from, but you can also argue with someone where it comes from. But then you become the new prototype of some kind of protocol. That is still antibiotic causing opposing forces in people, developing opposing forces in people. And just because you don't have the symptoms anymore, does that mean you actually beat cancer or you just took away the symptoms? Maybe you broke the cancer apart and now it's seeding some other place and waiting to take you down through an incremental process versus a condensed process. Okay? So you're only listening to the beautiful people and the ugly saviors trying to save you, or you're listening to an ex-cancer patient who said they beat cancer using whatever protocol that is out there and they just so happen to look aesthetically appealing. And you saw that all over the holistic world. All the different girls and guys saying they beat cancer, and now they have a protocol for you. And it's like a list of antibiotics. And if you're not aesthetically appealing, ex-cancer patient, people have no incentive to listen to you because ugliness implies cancer. I know how the game is played. The system will use the beautiful and the ugly people to sell death, destruction, and depression, and then knock them off their pedestal if they stray too far from the socially acceptable truths. In the meantime, you're so focused on looks and aesthetics that you barely even understand the words. But even if you are a wordsmith, you'll spin the words relative to the filter you have applied ever since day one, like a broken record on a loop. Even wordsmiths can spin words based upon their intention and background, and they have no incentive to do anything different but what they have been doing. And of course, the system will use beauty and ugliness to sell whatever the fuck it is they have to sell you, so you jump off the cliff with the rest of the beautiful, ugly people of the world. And so that's why you only listen to old sages and hot, sexual, gorgeous people with some kind of politics, religion, or science concept they want you to promote, which is why I'm not influential. I don't have any kids. I don't have any animals either. I didn't even put that down, but hey, yeah, people use their animals to sell whatever. So I have no kids. I'm not very sexualized. I'm not an old sage. I didn't beat cancer. And I'm not beautiful or sexual. But I need to add that whole animals, because animals do tractor beam people into also politics, religion, science. Of course I will be overlooked. No one can feel sorry for me or worship my beauty or cleverly disguise, deny my ugliness, calling me beautiful. Nope, I'm not influential at all. I guess that's kind of a good thing given the system's intentions. I'm pretty much safe. However, it is a good thing I'm not beautiful or completely ugly, because you would try to do what I'm doing and maybe you don't know what you're in for. That was a safety mechanism the system implemented to make sure what you have goes through a vetting process. So the fact that I have no animals, no children, I'm not very sexualized, I'm not an old sage, I didn't beat cancer, and I'm not beautiful or anything else, people will half listen to me versus listen to me. And that's probably a good thing. Because then what would happen is you have everybody doing what I'm doing and they don't have what it takes. And I get that too. Okay? So I'm going to add that in as far as, give me 1 second, animals. Because yes, animals are used as a tool. Animals are used as a tool to get people on board with something. And once I got rid of my animal and it wasn't a source of ugliness because of the situation, or a source of beauty if it wasn't the ugliness, then you're not going to be influential if you don't have an animal or a child or something else. And that's pretty crazy. That's flipping crazy. All right, so give me 1 minute. I got to add that in because that's something that needs to be said. Jeez. Okay, here we go. 5, I'll say 6. No animals, pets. All right. Yeah. That's also a bargaining chip. Animals and children. So, yep, I was fighting something in my immune system the last month. Because I was coughing. I was coughing so much. Like, literally coughing so much. And hawking out loogies the last couple of days. Okay? And so, I was fighting something in my immune system the last month. And finally was able to sleep really well. But my snoring drove Jason to the couch. So, he was up there with me. We're watching TV together, and we're watching some Netflix called The Pope's Exorcist, and I'm just like, oh gosh, there's some pretty evil shit, but I mean, I know my husband likes that stuff, and I can watch half of it, but it was just like, okay, so I was closing my eyes, and I was also falling asleep, and I can catch myself snoring a few times, that even my husband, every time I snore, he'd be like, wake up, Jillian, oh my god, you're snoring through the movie, I can't, I'm like, oh my god. So he finally, after the movie was over, and all that, and I'm just tired of being woken up because I'm snoring, and he finally went downstairs. So I noticed how fatigued I was yesterday after being up since 3 a.m. and then napping at 10 a.m., then doing 3 loads of laundry and cooked mashed potatoes and cabbage and onions and venison, and folding all the laundry, cleaning bathroom left, and waking up refreshed. Now, I was eating raw cabbage the last couple of days. I knew I needed to balance out the acids because of all the growth and everything, but I didn't cook it. And so, but last night I cooked the cabbage with the onions and the mashed potatoes with the evaporated milk. And then we had venison. And my husband, he doesn't have cabbage too often. He doesn't like it too often. But I said, I'm cooking cabbage, onions, and potatoes, and the venison. He's like, okay. And right after he ate all of that, he went to the restroom. And then about maybe an hour later, I had to go to the restroom. And oh my God, was I releasing demons. It was crazy, crazy. And now I'm doing great. Okay? But it's the cooking of the cabbage is what's amazing. When you're feeling sick, cook up some cabbage and onions and taters and some meat. I'm telling you, I mean, it doesn't always come out the way you want, and I had to help it out a little bit. But once I helped it all out, then it was the body releasing more. And it was like crazy ass Tootsie Rolls coming out. Just like it was a couple years ago when I was completely just bedridden. But yeah, those Tootsie Rolls are like Mr. Hanky, and they are like another demon that could stay stuck inside the body. But I have also been hawking up loogies, and every single time I hawk up a loogie or hack up stuff, and I feel myself farting, which is a good thing. Okay? And so I noticed how fatigued I was yesterday after being up since 3 a.m. and then napping at 10 a.m., then doing 3 loads of laundry, cooked mashed potatoes and cabbage and onions and venison, folding all laundry, cleaning bathroom, and then waking up refreshed. And since I released demons last night before I went to bed, this morning, no demons to release, really, except to blow my nose a little bit, and that's about it. And have coffee with my husband and feel like, oh my God, a whole new person. Remember, I went through 3 years of hell. But when new variants come in, like we've heard, the norovirus is rampant here in Northeast Ohio. There is the Candida auris that is in hospitals and nursing homes. And it's the fungal infections. Okay, I mean, yeah, you know, in my person and in my situation that has gone through the hell, and I'm an O positive, yeah, you might take on stuff, but you'll know how to release it so it doesn't destroy you. That's the beauty of my blood type, and then the fact that I've conditioned myself up here and down there to release, as well as my armpits, under my boobs, back of my legs, wherever. You don't want to stop the demon from releasing. You really have to have the ability to handle the energy conversion of release. And people don't, so, okay. And so, yeah, so after posting those 50 pictures of myself and my husband, you know, people are saying, oh, you're still beautiful. And and people say that when I'm like, I'm not hot anymore. I'm not. You can look at what I used to be. The reason why I'm even posting that, not because I'm fishing for compliments. So that way you know that I speak from experience. When I was hot and sexual, even during the J world, when I was so skinny, and you saw those pictures, it didn't mean I was out of the woods. It just meant that I looked socially acceptable, aesthetically acceptable, which made me dangerous. Right? Because I was selling something that, yeah, maybe you need to reconsider curing yourself and being that skinny. But it gave me the love and the hate. And it gave me also the innovation, because then I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, how am I going to evolve from this? And so, warning, calling people beautiful and ugly or sexy are fighting words. Please stop calling me beautiful or sexy or ugly. Please avoid complimenting my looks, especially when I'm trying to tell you something. And so even though I call my husband hot, like I did during Valentine's Day, remember, my husband's still part of the mainstream. He still wants to be the hot, guy. He still is to me. I looked at him last night. We were laying in bed and we were just hanging out, but he still has the features of when I first met him. He's still very aesthetically pleasing. But I still also like his brain. It's not just his body. It's his brain too. He has a brain that's so fucking amazing. Like, he really does. He's a very, not only a kind person, but he is very thoughtful, and he doesn't fuck around. He doesn't mess around. And he's strategic. And he knows a lot more than he lets on. He's not the like me. I'm like, bleh. And he's like, he holds back a little bit. Okay. But when I met him on the phone, for the first time I talked to him on the phone, I already knew we were going to be compatible on some level because he was so opposite of me. He was so slower speaking, thoughtful behind his words. He spoke in a slower drawl. And I'm like Ricochet Rabbit, just throwing up on everything. And so I appreciate someone that's not like me. Because if he was like me, we'd supernova. We would both just completely energize each other out of existence. And so there's areas that I can energize him out of existence and other areas where he can slow me down and vice versa. Okay? And so, if you cannot appreciate my brain or what I've written, you'll be so focused on my body and face because you have failed to use your own brain. Only superficial people will focus on the body and the looks, regardless if it's an insult or a compliment, because they have not been taught to use their brain. Yes, that's my challenge I drop for the day. If that's insulting, imagine calling a man or a woman or a child beautiful or ugly. Children are neither beautiful or ugly. They only rise up to the level of the incompetence of their family. As you know, parents are all about trying to look hot, sexy, beautiful, or gorgeous. What are we setting people up for? Some people might get the gift of academics, but once your looks goes, will anyone listen to you if you go against the system? Introducing change. And you have now put them in a box. You jail them into impossible expectations. Because again, when you're telling me, oh, you're beautiful, you're still beautiful. I never said I was ugly. I never said that I wasn't beautiful. But that's when people say that as if they are countering me and arguing with me. Like, I wasn't looking for an argument. When you said, I never said I was ugly. I never said I was not. I mean, that's the thing when people say you're still beautiful. Okay, that's something random. That's random. That's something that you can't even say universally because that's not true for everything, for everybody. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And why even put that out there? Why? Selling love, beauty, and sex and men and women living off of compliments is a deadly game for men and women. Calling women and men ugly or beautiful, regardless of intention, is ensuring his or her premature exit from this earth. Endless shopping, plastics, botox, and food mitigation diet. Raising your boys and girls in this manner ensures a shorter lifespan. And so you see these people out there, whether California or Ohio or anywhere else, and they're thrusting their daughters out there. Oh, look, my daughter in her prom dress. And the seam is all the way up to almost her crotch. You can't even, or it's all form-fitting. What are you selling your daughters and sons into? That's like slave market. That's basically state-sanctioned slavery, okay? Because even marriage is based upon that, regardless of religion. And so when you have groomed people to only listen to old sages, ugly, sexy saviors, and hot, sexy, loving, beautiful people, they will sell you death, and they will fall, and you will follow them right over the cliff. Alchemists. And so if you still choose to call me beautiful or ugly, it's still an insult. You're trying to keep me in a box. And it's also a backhanded insult and backhanded compliment. You're not only mocking me, but also trying to convince yourself to stay stuck in deadly paradigms. I'm not fishing for insults or compliments, okay? I'm telling you biophysically what's going on in my world and how deadly it is to live in the type of situation of living off of compliments and insults. And so me trolling myself, so I can now look at the other side of it. Is my husband still hot rocking my world? Did I just put him in a box? If he was insulted by that, I would stop. I always tell him, I love and respect his brain. If someone is insulted by compliments, I would stop. It's not my place or your place to publicly massage anyone's ego. I don't want strangers making me feel good, bad, or sexual. Why would you want your children to fall under those types of spells that is prematurely sexualizing people? I heard something. Interesting. Not how you want to be treated, huh? Treat people how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated. However, seeing what people want and desire speaks to what they were groomed for as children and as adults. which is why I stay on my Facebook, because I don't want to keep playing two different games. It's exhausting. Yeah, I know you post your picture out there with your boobs hanging out and your lips all made up and all that, and you want everyone to love you and say that you're gorgeous and hot and sexual and all that. And when I don't, then God, Jillian, you can't give a compliment. You can't do this. You can't give yourself to somebody else like that. I'm like, but sometimes I feel obligated to, because you put yourself out there. It's like, that's what you want. And so when people want that, and then you post something that may look like what it is that you want, then you want people, then you give people what you want, not what they want. And so it's exhausting. Once you see what people are grooming for, you cannot unsee it. Then maybe you might have the luxury to feel disgusted by society and why we have so many predators in our society, because we give them the bait. We groom our children to be bait for the predators. That's what these mothers do. That's what these fathers do. They're like, oh, look what I made. I made a gorgeous girl, a gorgeous boy. Oh, look here. God, you're just serving everyone up on a platter for all the predators out there to go, woo, okay. Chew on that. Okay? And so, yeah, when someone said they agreed, and I get it, and that was good. I'm glad she agreed, because I know where she's coming from. And she made sense. Lindsay goes, Lindsay Lou, you're brilliant, though I'm kind enough to try your best to help people in your own way and have worthy ideals. As I've gotten older, I realize that the real beauty of people, the most beauty lies within anyways, and the majority have a hard time with the difference. I'm saying this because some of the people say you're beautiful, maybe meaning that. I totally get what you're saying, though, with all of it. And what she's saying, I mean, we need to leave nothing for assumptions. In my opinion, I think humans need to be more specific. What is beautiful about me? Oh, because you have big lips, because you have nice skin, because you have hair, you have relatively a flat stomach. Then you're like, an auctioneer naming off all the body parts for all the people to go and buy. And so if you want to call someone beautiful, just say, well, maybe you're not beautiful. Instead of saying beauty, say it's like invokes aesthetics, say brilliant, smart, clever, learn new words. That implies the brain. Okay? That's the thing. Those that don't have a huge vocabulary will go to the words of ugly, they'll go to adjectives, ugly, beauty, sensual, sexual, gorgeous. Yeah, that's Hollywood. And you see that in the religious world. Beautiful, gorgeous, sexual, bad, good, satanic. And so I had to rewrite what I was posting around those 50 pictures and that reel. I've been trying to say this for a long time, and I couldn't find the words, and I found the words. What if we erase the words beautiful and ugly out of our vocabulary? Calling women beautiful or ugly is an insult to women and men all over the world, because you're setting impossible standards even with your compliments. Calling women hot and sexy means you want to screw them if you could. You're telling them they should have children. Go find a husband or wife or someone to give you sperm or an egg or a child. And if we're not going to procreate children in the future, then it's time we dispense with living up to these standards of beauty and ugly. Because then what are you trying to sell? Death, destruction, and baubles? Remember, 2045, we're going to have major infertility in the Western world. So then what are we selling women and men for then if we're not going to have children? As far as a main thing that we're getting away from the family. Then you're selling them for sex. You're selling them to sell death and destruction. What if we stopped complimenting women? What if you stopped insulting them? Then we can talk honestly about the actual health and wellness contributing to longevity that doesn't cater to standards of beauty that are impossible. Symmetry and beauty is a byproduct, not something as a target or an intention. And of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I find people calling me beautiful when I'm not focusing on that as an insult to discount my thoughts around this subject matter. You're still beautiful, they say. I never said I wasn't. I know you don't come from malintention. I just need to explain myself better. And so when I put originally, Yeah, I used to be a hot chick too. All right. So all these 25-year-olds shaking their ass at me saying that they're better than me to my face or anywhere out there. Yeah, I used to be in your shoes too. I played the fucking game. I know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. I know exactly what you're feeding into. I know exactly what you're eating up. It's not rocket science to know what girls and 25-year-olds that are all hair, lips, and nails are doing out there playing with their makeup and shit. I know what you're doing. You're having a bunch of sex. You're looking for Mr. Right. And you're trying to figure out your place in this world through your body. And you might have a degree that you're not even using. And if you are using it, you're still riding on your looks and sexuality. I get it. I played the game too. So if you're playing that game, you better have something else to offer when those days are over. You better be gaining some knowledge. You better figure out how to save yourself in this crazy world that beauty and sexuality only lasts so long. And life only lasts so long when that is your only focus. Yeah, I used to be a hot chick too. Once you go through this change, and sometimes it's earlier than others, now you have to stay alive, fight that beast within, or the beast will destroy you. So that change, menopause. Men too, menopause. Doesn't mean menopause is deadly. Doesn't mean that it'll take away all your looks and you look like, a troll underneath it, like a Shrek. But you're going to go through changes that are not going to look aesthetically appealing during some of those changes. Sometimes you might be a few years of looking a little bit rough. And it might even out. But with this whole climate change, you'll be fluctuating all the time, assuming that you can even survive those changes that people are so against because they were taught only to look like a certain standard of beauty that you see all over the magazines. Men also go through the change. What I'm trying to say is when the hotness disappears, and maybe you're pretty beautiful or whatever, you got to have something up there in the brain, because if it's just about being beautiful, people will harm themselves to stay beautiful. Could our society be a society that doesn't have to mention looks? That you could have something amazing through the brain to offer to your society? That your society could respect thought and difference of thought? Because in some circles, if you don't look a certain way because of what you look like in the past, your thoughts are not worth considering. What I'm saying is, could people respect change without trying to keep people in a box of beautiful? Almost turning it into an insult versus a compliment. When someone says, you're still beautiful, it's like you're trying to convince them or you or them are not ugly through the change. I can admit when I look ugly, and sometimes I do, because change isn't always beautiful and symmetrical. Change is rashes, fatigue, anger, outbursts, itchiness, crossed eyes. And women are held to a certain standard that if you change, then you're not worth listening to. You're not worth being alive. You're told you're mentally ill or unhealthy or ugly. But just because you are ugly doesn't mean you have to be beautiful. Why does beautiful and ugly have to exist? Why even use those words? Because as soon as you imply someone is beautiful, then there is a standard of ugly that is not acceptable. And women destroy themselves, so do men, to live up to standards of beauty, so as not to be ugly. Yeah, it's deadly. What if we erase the words beautiful and ugly out of our vocabulary? What if we stop feeding off of people complimenting us? What if we stop fishing for compliments? And I wasn't fishing for compliments. I was forced to respond to them because of what else am I going to do? You weren't forced, but I mean, if I deleted them, then they'd be like, well, why'd you do that? And so I was telling you that I used to be hot, and now I see the curse of beauty and hotness. It's deadly for men and women because they can't even fathom being alive and being what they would think is ugly. And since I was the standard of beauty and hotness many, many moons ago, I can speak from experience. So yeah, that picture of me dancing in that club in the 90s, yeah, that was my heyday, was the 90s and some of the 2000s. But I was fucking hot in the 90s, and I knew it. Okay? And when you're hot in the 90s in Silicon Valley, you're around people who are smart. You attract people who are smart because you're in Silicon Valley. Most of these people are like guys that are in high levels of whatever, and they're attracted to you, and you're taking in the information, whatever it is. And then even the 2000s. But then there's the late 2000s. Because then I realized that that's not going to last for long. Now it's time to figure out some shit. because you can't survive on that. I already saw the writing on the wall. That monster within was moving, and it was torturing the hell out of me. And so I knew I was not going to survive the California lifestyle of trying to keep that youth and beauty and hotness and sexuality. And I'd have to use my looks and sexuality and my smartness to find something relatively stable. But even then, I had to cultivate that. I didn't just walk into this marriage with everything the way it is. You know how hard I had to work? You know what I had to fight? Some of you who've been around me for a while saw when I first left California. Saw when I was going through all the bullshit with the in-laws because I was different. They were different, and we couldn't find a happy medium. And I don't blame them because we were on their turf. My husband and I had to find our own place. We couldn't live with people that were different or the same. We had to find our own way. And so we did, but it was a fucking fight. All right? And so I had to fight for this. And then that's where the J world also was birthed from my marriage. That was a conspiracy world. It was around my marriage. And so today I'm finally human. Not a sex piece or a beauty standard or a death angel. Okay? So when you saw a picture of my husband, that's when him and I first met. That was one of the pictures that he put out there on his profile. And he looked like that, yes. When I met him, he kind of looked like that. Yes, he was skinny. So was I. Relatively skinnier than what I am today. Okay, and then you saw a picture of me dancing. And yeah, I had the long black hair. I had the face of the 90s girl. I even wore the little choker, you know, and I played the game. I looked cute. And then you saw later on down the road as the hormones were finally balancing themselves out, and I wasn't so estrogenic like I was back in the 90s. I was highly estrogenic in the 90s, and that's where all the PMS came from. Then it was that painful change. And the J juice helped release some of the demons. So that's why I went back to a little bit of the youth and the beauty and the hotness for that minute. Remember on Dr. Phil, I looked relatively socially acceptable on Dr. Phil. And then the climate changed, 2020. And then that's what triggered the menopause to go full on, hot flashes. Okay? It got me out of that cured state of what I was even during the Dr. Phil days because of the J juice, which wasn't deadly. It was either going to catalyze the opposing forces and cause a movement that people may or may not expect, or it was going to cure you into a specific state of existence. And then you can play the part. You can look like the hot sexual thing. And so then the last 3 years was then finally accepting that, yeah, there's no more of that curse of being hot anymore. Now it's about the brain. But that's fine that people use their body, but that only lasts so long. So if you're going to use your body, you better also use your body to get the brain cells going. Or else then you'll just be a bot or a sex doll for somebody else. All right, so this meme said, when people everywhere are sick and dying, but no one allows to mention the most obvious reason. And I said, yeah, traditional and alternative alchemy plus climate change. And so alchemists will not admit they are also contributory factors to diet suddenly. Lay alchemists say their concoctions are much better than the professional alchemists. Because what is your intention with alchemy and why? The system needed many people to procreate in a very specific way. And when procreation becomes a detriment to society and the people, the system had to reverse the intentions. What was once relatively safe will be deadly because the poles have flipped and the climate has changed. Overpopulation equals cancer, disease, chronic illness, diet suddenly, war, and violence. What do you mean overpopulation? Yeah, when you have so many opposing forces within, that's called the aging process, and it breaks down your infrastructure, your vital organs, and it chews away at your ability to remember. That's where you get the dementia and the Alzheimer's. People literally have to release those demons, but not the way that they have out there that's circulating in the alchemist world. The way I have my book, if you can handle it. You may not be able to handle it because of whatever reasons, and I couldn't tell you what they are. You only know what you think you can and can't do, and you talk to your doctor. But overpopulation is cancer, because that opposing force is taking up so much room that's eating all the resources, even competing with you as a person trying to survive. And that's when people go and get operations to carve out the opposing forces. But overpopulation is cancer, disease. When I was hawking out loogies the last couple days, coughing out loogies, that was overpopulation, and I was releasing the demons without attacking them. I was feeding them in and releasing them through my nose, blowing my nose, pooping, hawking out loogies, farting. Chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, and dietary is overpopulation, violence. When you are in war with yourself because of the opposing forces, as you decide to keep inside, you'll be at war with somebody out there because you'll project the war inside out there. And that happens in the activist world. Oh, God, the Dunning-Kruger effect. I posted that because Ben Shapiro, my husband was listening to Ben Shapiro, and he was mentioning that. And that's true. I think I had that Dunning-Kruger effect way back when I was in my early 20s trying to apply for jobs that I had no business going for, but I wanted to learn stuff. And if I could sell myself that I knew how to do something and then learn on the job and then know what I didn't know, right? Even at the expense of that employer, I knew what I had to study for. So sometimes it's okay to go into something that you're not qualified for to figure out what it is you have to qualify because you won't know how to apply, won't know what it is people want unless you actually are in a situation where they want something that you can't deliver, but you'll learn how to do it, but they don't want you to learn on the job. They want you to know it, and then you go and learn that. Okay, but that, again, is something that you have to be okay with doing. And I was like that. I was overconfident with some of my incompetence back in my 20s because I wanted to learn everything. Okay? And so that's kind of a trippy thing. But yeah, I use that method to my advantage. So the four stages of competence are unconscious incompetence, when you don't know what you don't know; conscious incompetence, when you're aware of what you don't know but haven't yet learned it; conscious competence, when you're gaining knowledge; unconscious competence, when you've mastered something. Okay? And so what's the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's unconscious incompetence, when you don't know what you don't know; conscious incompetence, when you're aware of what you don't know but haven't learned it. Okay? And so that the Dunning-Kruger is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when someone overestimates their abilities of knowledge in a specific area. People who experience the Dunning-Kruger effect may feel confident in their abilities, even if they have little or no experience. Be quick to offer solutions or advice without fully understanding the situation. And that's right there in the health and wellness world in the diet suddenly groups. They are overestimating their abilities or knowledge in a specific area. Okay? And they don't understand the full situation. And they offer solutions and advice. They lack the skills and knowledge to back up their claims. Be aware of their own limitations. And yeah, in the beginning of the J world, I was like that. I had to spend the last 5 years to figure some shit out. Okay? And so they're unaware of their own limitations, assume that others share their own level of expertise. And so, yeah, I would go and read this information and look at what you've been recommending to people. That you have no idea their background, their lifestyle, or their belief system, really. And then you realize that maybe you shouldn't be loving or hating or following someone unless you happen to know yourself very well. And even then, do you even know what you know or don't know? All right, so that's why I posted that, so you can figure it out for yourself. And so if you have 1 month to prepare, but what got me in this, now, this copy and paste that I didn't come from that article. Okay, what's the article? The article is preparing for a power outage, what you need to do to be ready. But I copied this AI version list of what to do. And what got me was if you feel faint, go to ground. This means you should get close to the ground as possible to avoid injury when you black out. I know my hair looks crazy. I don't care. But wow. If you feel faint, go to ground. This means you should get close to the ground as possible to avoid injury when you black out. So I'm just saying, get prepared in April. That eclipse is going to be interesting. I hope nothing happens, but from what I've seen and what the system is telling us about telling us, there's a lot to prepare for. Not only so many people converging, they're saying so many people converging. And maybe somebody is radicalizing people to go and travel to Ohio, to Texas, to all the places that they have mentioned. Oh, Jesus. If you feel faint, go to ground. Because you know something might happen. Don't take a shower during a power outage because there is a legitimate risk of electric shock. Oh my God. Turn off electrical appliances when you were using when the power goes out. Okay, they said prepare for at least 3 days. 3 days of power outage, you know those are on life support will be dead. You know those that can't handle the aggressive weather won't be around. Or they'll be even more at a deficit, suffering. You'll know those that are stuck somewhere. They're going to eat up all the food in that area. All the out-of-towners. They're saying already that in Bell County, Texas, there's going to be cell phone outages. There's going to be food outages, water outages, whatever. Why are they projecting that? You don't think the system would prepare for that kind of influx of people? Just like when you have the Hall of Fame, the system prepares to have a lot more food and water and things and resources to handle the Hall of Fame every year. You wouldn't think that now with what's going on at 226, they're saying that expect all these things. Why? Why don't we just prepare to have that many people come? If you have that many people who are going to camp out, well, you make sure you have, just like any fair, you make sure you have the food, the water, resources, and bathrooms. And if you have a bunch of people at hotels, that should tell you a census or projection. They're going to have a lot more people. Make sure you have food, water, and resources available for that many people in these hotels that are sold out, allegedly. I don't know, but just if you're in those areas, stay home and stay safe. That's all I can say. And so I'm going to read this whole thing. I've been trying to say this for so long, and I couldn't find the words, and I found the words. What if we erase the word beautiful and ugly out of our vocabulary? Calling women beautiful or ugly is an insult to women and men all over the world because you're setting impossible standards even with your compliments. Calling women hot and sexy means you want to screw them if you could. You're telling them they should have children. Go find a husband, someone to give you a sperm, or the other way around. Go get pregnant, or go find someone to make you the better half. If we're not going to procreate children in the future, then it's time to dispense with living up to these standards of beauty and ugly. Because then what are you trying to sell? Death, destruction, baubles? What if you stop complimenting women? What if you stopped insulting them? Then we can talk honestly about an actual health and wellness contributing to, I already read this. What am I doing here? Okay, I read that. Okay. I thought I didn't read that. Okay. Did I? Okay, let me just make sure. Yeah, I guess I did read. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the things I read. Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. I write so much. So make sure that I did read. Okay, I did read that. Okay. All right. Sorry. And so last word for now, right? Not really, but medicine. Little sins over time turned into huge sins. Yeah, it's a sin to take medicine, regardless, natural or holistic. And so I said, no Facebook Live today. That was yesterday. Tomorrow. Read my last few posts. It is happening. Landmines are detonating in people's bodies all over the world. That is die suddenly or recent past diagnoses. It does not matter if those landmines were recently acquired or waiting for an energy trigger. If you avoid dealing with landmines, energy explosions via symptoms, that landmine will be unavoidable, untreatable, and then boom, gone. Which is also why the anti-everything groups recommending remedies and holistic stuff, supplements, are just laying more landmines in their own body, mind, and spirit to be the future next death suddenlies for their survivors, to blame one industry or of their choice. What's a landmine? It is an explosive mine laid on or just under the surface of the ground. So what do you mean by that, Jillian? Because when you're taking something that it's going to be an opposing force causing fertility, okay, like a remedy, like a surgery, like any kind of a drug, supplement, whatever, what you're doing is, since the person doesn't want to feel the pain of release, so they take something to stop the pain of release, then they're developing what would be either then or in the later future, fast-moving cancers and fast-moving diseases when all the conditions are right. Because you're taking those specific remedies to stop the release, of which then you're housing opposing forces within, which then might give you a psychedelic experience, might give you relief, it might give you even pleasure. But then what's going to happen is when all the conditions are right, and then that monster becomes so huge, it metastasizes, then when all of the conditions are right, and then the body allows the bloom to happen, that becomes the new conception, which is life, but it could be in your death. It can be in the life of that fast-moving cancer and your death. Because even when people died, they said that the mortuary people still see the body moving even in death, which means that the life in the body that caused that person's death is still around. That human was the sacrifice to that life in the body. That was the opposing force. That's the scariest of all. And that's why you see people still moving, the body still jerking after it actually died. And so landmines are colonies of microbial offspring from all the remedies and surgeries and prescription drugs and slow you down drugs like cannabis. And when they get activated, they are formidable. Mutually assured destruction is when you either cause so much energy that your body supernova is using up so many resources that you can't afford to lose that fast relative to your intention. Okay? And so that's the thing, is when you have so many opposing forces in the body, and then that opposing force uses up so much energy, or so it causes so much energy in supernovas and uses up so many resources that you can't afford to lose relative to your retention. So that's called living on credit. That's called taking loans and writing checks your body can't cash. Right? Or you plant landmines in your body like time release capsules. It just takes an aggressive energy to set them off, because those time release capsules were meant for a very specific algorithm in that environment, not just your internal environment, but also your external environment. When the environment changes, so does the time release. So when I wrote my book about concentric circles, I think I wrote that the outside influences the inside. People are taking certain dosages of medication and even illicit drugs, and then the climate changes. It also changes how influential those drugs are. And so that's why people overdose, because the climate made whatever you're doing stronger and faster. Time-release medications are drugs that are released slowly over time within the body rather than all at once. This enables a sustained or delayed action within the body, making sure that the individual doesn't get too much of the drug at once or doesn't get it right away. But when the environment changes, that time release will also change. See, people don't realize during climate change, everything fucking changes. And what you thought was a certain amount of drug and even how influential it is, when you have an expectation, it'll be the way it was before, and it isn't. That's when people have to go and change for a lower dosage or a different strength of drug, and then they're out of that cured state. It's weird. Most people are terrified of feeling energy, plant landmines in their body. So when they can't avoid the energy, those landmines detonate. That's called die suddenly, after many, many years in the holistic allopathic surgical field of counterattacks. The system would rather you plant landmines than cause so much energy all at once, which is why you're not supposed to be doing cocaine. But they don't care if you do pot, because that's a slow time release. When people plant landmines in their bodies, it's very hard to make correlation equals causation. And if you don't know any better, you'll plant so many landmines in your body that it just takes another energy conversion to detonate them all at once. And so I allowed the system to detonate all the landmines in my body the last 3 years. I didn't stop it. I did not develop any more than I had to based upon my exposure to other people. That's why I had to release so many people out of my world and release myself out of people's worlds, because I knew what I was in for. And I got a lot of flack for it. I got a lot of backlash for it. I got a lot of shit for it. And when you're at war with your body, you have to feed the enemy and release them. You never attack the enemy because the enemy will attack you right back. Which is why I see no healer or medical person. They are the mercenaries of the system attacking your body, mind, and spirit. And then your body attacks you because you allowed it to go through harm. But again, if you're not conditioned to deal with detonating the landmines in your body and supporting that war correctly and diplomatically, you will need the mercenaries to make the detonation as palatable as possible, if it's even possible. People who have more substance to them can handle the system managing the detonation process. But it's when you're in hospice, it's that you have nothing else to you. They have nothing left to treat. You're stuck with all those little landmines, and eventually that one last one that goes off will be the straw that broke the camel's back. But you can only get treated for as long until the system, but you can only get treated for so long until the system cannot treat you anymore. That's called hospice. So if you think you have what it takes to redirect without destroying yourself and torturing yourself too much, talk to your doctor and the people you respect the most, because they will make you or break you. They helped you get into this mess. They will have to be the one to help you out of it, because you were not conditioned to be on your own, because you might surprise yourself. Maybe you might surprise yourself, but I don't count on it. So those of you that have cancer, disease, and chronic illness, it was your whole community that fostered that. So your whole community is either going to make you or break you if you were relying on your whole community. And the system knew that people are reliant on their whole community not to change, to resist change, to shit on change. That it's going to be impossible for someone who relies on their community to save themselves, because they'd have to go and explain. And if you don't have the words to explain what you're doing, then you have to then go see a doctor to give you the words to explain what their intention is, which is ultimately your intention anyways. So the sun poles are reversing after 11 years. So that's why 11 is so, yeah. So maybe the bombers are right, but I don't know. When they said in the Leave the World Behind that maybe no one's in control. Okay, so it has a dynamic and complex magnetic field that changes over time. This is the sun, the coronal sun. And after every 11 years, and every 11 years or so, the sun undergoes a major change. Its magnetic poles flip. This means that the sun's north pole and south poles switch places, reversing the direction of the magnetic field that extends through the solar system. I don't doubt anything. Regardless if you think it's a lie, they're telling you for a reason, because major changes are upon us. And you'll never know if science is reacting or acting. Everything is reaction to something. It doesn't even matter where it originates from. Find a way to survive it. So if that's true, every 11 years the sun undergoes a major change. If magnetic poles flip, then why wouldn't we have seen climate change the way it is every 11 years? Well, yeah, you'll figure it out. I can't say anything. Goddamn. So why do you love or hate people? Have you ever thought about anyone you loved or hated in the past and present, in the future, was meant to happen the way it was? That way because you were told to love and hate a person from the past, present, or future? And even those actions were developed or characterized in such ways so you had a feeling about them? Whether it was an organic situation because you had no idea the background, or it was a synthetic because you knew the background, any feelings about a person, place, or thing, or country was meant for you to have. So it is when you can separate yourself from the story and the reactions to the story, you might set yourself free, because then you'll save your reactions to save yourself. I don't love or hate anyone, any person, place, or thing, or country, or leader. I also don't buy into the helpless programming, okay? I understand why it exists, because it develops order. Once you understand why the world must be the way it is right now, today, not only will you stop resisting, but you'll develop an order that will be good for you, and it will be acceptable to your government and environment and economy. None of us are inherently bad. Remember how antibodies work in the system. The antigen are programmed to take over. The antibodies defend, and you can program antigen and antibodies to do whatever it wants. Now look at yourself as either antigen or antibodies to someone else and yourself. It is all programmed by biotechnology, religion, politics, and science. That's when you step out of the game and the war, or else you will fall into a mutually assured destruction. Because the system already implanted the landmines or the chaos within. The system implanted stories in you, and they also implanted microbes that you took in freely through remedies and prescription drugs and illicit drugs and medicine. And even though you did not get benefit at the time, and even though you did get benefit at the time relative to expectation and intention, you didn't realize it would work against you later on if you couldn't release those demons. The system already implanted the chaos within, which is why you're seeing chaos in your community, body, mind, and spirit relative to the situation. Which is why all of us resemble some kind of archetype, acting out the programming. Do you have what it takes to bring an order to your own immune system and household? Can you listen to indicators and discern whether or not you should be listening to government or not? Can you bring order into your own body, mind, and spirit and household and finances? Do you understand symptoms in the war is the war within that you have to step out of that war and release those demons without destroying yourself? And if you can't, you'll strike back so hard on yourself with remedies and surgeries, it will be a mutually assured destruction. That's called die suddenly. The system is trying to tell you, if you can read between the lines, when to stay home and when to stay safe and what to prepare for. If you are one of those who just scoff at the face of authority, you'll be out there putting yourself in harm's way. How many of you are going to go and travel someplace for the eclipse? If nothing happens, the system sees who falls for shiny objects. It's not that difficult to put people in situations they can't get out of. Either they're so oblivious, scoffing in the face of authority, or then becomes a mutually assured destruction. Okay? A military strategy and national security policy doctrine. It is a principle of deterrence that assumes that a nuclear attack by one superpower could be met with an overwhelming nuclear counterattack. And so that's what happens when people have so many symptoms and from all the landmines within, and they detonate and you feel the energy, then you're going to go and counterattack with then the remedies, the surgeries, and then people die suddenly. And so the whole medical holistic system, energy healing world, is a counterattack that people cannot resist. Over time, they don't survive that many counterattacks against their own body, mind, and spirit. 61 million people died in 2023. If that doesn't even faze you, if that doesn't even resonate, given all the information that's out there, that was part of the self-destruct programming. 61 million. That's a staggering number when you finally look at why people die. Starvation is just as rampant in the first world as it is in the third world. It's just socially acceptable and glamorized. Starvation leads to heart attacks, strokes, and accidents. When you have so many mouths to feed in your body, mind, and spirit and household, and even on your Facebook, you will destroy yourself in the name of feeding everyone but yourself. The nice house and the beautiful car and the huge following is a deception causing starvation. People would rather starve themselves so they can put money in their cars and vacations. I mean, I get it. People need to escape their own enslavement. That was self-inflicted because no one is holding a gun to anyone's head telling them to support such an extravagant lifestyle and expectation. Look at people advocating starvation, organic, and they have nice cars and houses until they can't eat. That was the deception of wealth. You can be so beautiful and smart and starving, and if you believe you should die someday, you'll starve yourself to prove it to everyone. People are proving they should die someday because they're glamorizing diet, starvation, and beauty, and of course, big families worshiping their offspring. And when the beast moves within, they do a counterattack that causes mutually assured destruction while catering to the latest archetypes out there, playing their part very well. We thank you for your service. Who needs the Incas and the Aztecs throwing their virgins in volcanoes when you have people on Facebook willing to do it to their own extraordinary, do it in their own extraordinary way of talking and taking everyone down with them while they're at it. Thank you for being the human sacrifice, because I don't want to be one. I choose not. Something is coming. Yes, something is coming. The cell phone outage was terrifying. Warning. Okay. All right. So April 8th, eclipse warning. If you can stay home, stay home. All right. 13 states. 13 is the magic number. I'm telling you, some crazy shit. And so eclipse emergency declared in Texas County. When they say the county expects heavy traffic, shortages of food and fuel, and disruption to cell service. Yeah, okay. You know. How do you think the giants were destroyed? The humans changed the climate, or the climate changed, and the terrain. Even the giant trees were cut down, so it became unfavorable for the giants to sustain themselves. And I'm sure a type of nuclear war happened. And then the ones that got away were hunted down and destroyed. History always repeats. Remember, there's a reason why. Make sure you understand the reason so you don't destroy yourself through resistance. Okay, so whether or not it was a cycle in the sun every 11 years, and even more so as, I don't know, or you saw that I even saw it in the Tartaria where they showed this big, huge machine that cut down the tree. And then, what is it called? Avatar. They cut down the tree of life. The system is telling you that there were changes that were intentional way back when. But again, you have the luxury to choose whatever story you want. And so immune suppression is fertility, and it's part of the health and wellness world. Immune activation is brutal. The body will attempt to purge out the offspring, especially aggressive ones working against the system. When you're on a strict diet because you're trying to suppress your immune system, you have to eat the foods not on your diet list very slowly and take in all the food a little bit at a time and let your doctor know because you will have symptoms. Would you be able to just cough, sneeze, and blow your nose, potentially conditioning your lower immune system to release? Again, you would have to have a doctor oversee that situation. Are doctors equipped to transition people back on the food supply? You'd have to pay a doctor very well to be with you and on call 24/7 because you would have to be sick and have someone help you through that sickness if it becomes more than you can manage. Even though all food is necessary, the reason why you are intolerant to different types of food was because you conditioned your body not to accept the release process unless the system came in and forced your system to release or carved out the offending microbes. Which is why blood types A and B have a different food category to eat because their body had a hard time processing food because they cannot handle the release process and retention necessary for long-term survival. Even some blood type O's, because they were conditioned not to feel the body do what it needs to do during immune system activation. And again, you would have to know, and so would a doctor have to know what was done to you as a child as far as medication, as well as what you have conditioned to feel as an adult. Only you and your doctor can save yourself, but your doctor can't save you. And so if you can't save yourself, nobody can, not even a doctor. Anytime you suppress your immune system with remedies, food mitigation diets, and herbs medicine, that can't last forever. Sin, misdemeanor, sin. I have dealt with immune system activation since the great pandemic of 2019, and it was fucking brutal. So some people have tried to go back on the food supply, even though they are diabetic, okay? And they have tried to take all the food in the food supply that they could because they were listening to me or somebody else, and they ended up in the hospital. Because you have to do things slowly. You can't just get off your diet and your drugs and just eat all the food. It has to be done slowly. And you have to have an intention that you can sell to your doctor. So then he'd be willing to help you through that process. Usually you'd be an allergist because allergists deal with both sides of the issue. Help you get onto the food that you're allergic to or help you mitigate allergic reactions. And you're going to have to then sell them into picking one side or the other that you choose. And if they're not willing to help you, then find a doctor who's willing to help you. And if they have to be on call 24/7, do you have the means to pay for that? Okay? So, even though I said you need all food in the food supply, it doesn't mean that you can handle all food in the food supply right off the bat. It has to be a transition. You can't quit anything cold turkey, and you can't get on the food supply if you've been allergic cold turkey. Okay? And that's the thing. If I can release demons over the last 7 years, could someone take on demons for however long? Well, that's the thing that you're going to have to figure out. So I'm a type O releasing demons, and someone who's a type A and B has to take on demons, so to speak. And again, that's something that you're going to talk to the people around you because they're going to have to watch that process. And it's a brutal process. I'll tell you, it's brutal. And so someone was talking about body shaming. And that body shaming someone who's skinny is just as bad as body shaming someone who is FAT. And since I'm not coming from, hey, you gotta look gorgeous and hot and sexual and aesthetically appealing, I'm coming from a very clinical perspective of why obesity, morbid obesity, could be deadly and why being so underweight could be also just as deadly. I don't think it's body shaming unless you are ashamed of your body. Please don't project shame. Clinical perspectives on body mass index to the naked eye does not have to be characterized as body shaming. Because when you are developing a thesis for survivability in a very aggressive environment, body mass index is very relevant and has nothing to do with shaming of anyone's body. Because skinny and fat are all relative to perception. But we know there's such thing as morbidly obese, and we also know there's such thing as extremely underweight or clinically underweight. And the supporting factors would have to do with diagnosable conditions along with food intolerances. And so you can mention in general clinical obesity and clinical emaciation, implying there are conditions that are known to be the actual patient, or known to the actual patient, supporting why people have a thesis of the cause of why premature diet suddenly happens when people suffer from those conditions. Okay, so I can mention in general clinical obesity and clinical emaciation. And then there's the implication that there are conditions that are known to the actual patient, which is why they're seeing an allergist, or why they're seeing a naturopathic or a diet person or whatever, that they have food intolerances. Just because the solution is given to you, the solution to whatever said problem is given to you by the system, does not mean that the discussion is done with. No, it means that is room for further discussion, why it is that we have this situation. And what else do we need to look at and consider besides taking away food or adding certain foods? As soon as you mention that you have a condition that you say you can't help, and it's not for anyone to say you can help it, you've already implied that there is room for discussion why that condition exists to begin with. And then you offer your perspective. It doesn't mean you have to embrace somebody else's perspective, but you don't need to take someone else's perspective personally. And the first thing is identifying the factors of nutrition and malnutrition that person is dealing with. Because starvation is the number one reason why people are dying. An aggressive, extreme body mass index on each end, whether it's too big or too small, is a huge indicator. And starvation leads to heart attacks and strokes. You are missing the vital nutrients to release demons and to eat food to sustain vital organ infrastructure. Instead of feeling sensitive about discussing things like this, maybe listen to what somebody is explaining before you become so defensive that your situation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everything is up for discussion. If you feel offended, then maybe you should not be listening to diverse thought processes and stay in your homogenized world and block everyone out there who thinks differently. That will ensure what you expect will happen, and nobody will get in the way of you destroying yourself. And then you get to be self-righteous because you know better than everybody else. But in my world, everything's up for discussion, because when you are in a homogenized groups, you have zero freedom to discuss anything because you might offend somebody. And while that's great in specific context, okay, like corporate America or diverse company, I couldn't live in a world where I could not speak when I needed to speak at the time I needed to speak it, which is why I work for myself and my husband. I don't need to be muzzled by my community. Evolution cannot function with a muzzle. Just like confidence does not come from silence. Confidence is something that must be expressed, or else it's just silence. You can say someone is standing with confidence, but you have no idea if they're confident or not. You're making an assumption unless they express what they're confident in. And when people have feelings, they must express them, or else someone will make assumptions. So confidence, the feeling or belief that you can rely on someone or something, a firm trust. So confidence does not come from silence, just like evolution does not wear a muzzle. In this environment, I'd rather have more weight on me that is relatively healthy for my body mass index and survivability and adaptation than try to please someone by looking hot and sexual and aesthetically appealing. At the end of the day, I'm the one that either lives or dies, which means I can't destroy myself to please all of you or anyone else. All of us will be making choices who it is we're catering to. And are we catering to others and being their sacrificial lamb? Or are we catering to ourselves and saving ourselves and completely block out those who don't understand and be self-righteous and still stay alive? Because you can be self-righteous and block out people and still die anyways. So the choice is yours. The choice is mine. So if people are trying to counter me, and I know I'm going to stay alive, because what would I die from? Unless it's a nuclear war and it came right down to me. But I wouldn't die from a heart attack or a stroke. I have a strong heart. Oh, I feel the frequencies. They're pretty aggressive. But I also have food. I'm not starving myself. I'm not too obese. I'm not too underweight. I don't have any children. I don't have any animals. I don't have too many competing resources, too many things that compete for resources in my world. And if they do, I'll get the hives. I know that there's a new entity in my body that I will have to release and deal with and feed and release. And so those are the indicators that I have more life than usual is because I have mucus, because I have hives, because I have disease. And then I release it and I feed it and I respect it. I don't attack it. And so there's nothing like the latitude to be sick when no one forcing medicine down your throat. If you can't afford to be sick, don't watch my stuff. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. So what's Medi? Middle. And the origin of many English words, including medieval, mediocre, and media. Sin. An immoral act considered to be transgressions against divine law. A sin in the eyes of God. And that's the 7 deadly sins as well as medicine. And so similar is an immoral act, wrong, wrongdoing, act of evil and wickedness, transgression, crime, offense, misdeed, misdemeanor, error, lapse, fall from grace, trespass, wickedness, evil, evil doing, sinfulness, ungodliness, unrighteousness, immorality, vice, iniquity, irreligious, irreverence, profanity, blasphemy, impiety, impiousness, sacrilege, profanation, desecration. And the opposite is virtue, good, and verb, commit a sin, whatever. Okay. And so those that are in all the different religions, taking their allopathic and holistic medicine, claiming they are so pure, they're pure blood. Are you fooling yourself? You're fooling yourself. All right. There were 61 million people who died in 2023. Regardless of what and who you blame the death on, climate change was always the catalyst of death, even if it was never coined as climate change or COVID-19. Dying from natural causes or accidents came from climate change. People couldn't adapt to the changes. Okay? All right. This person. Okay. I'll like it. All right, give me 1 second. All right, I'll read this. Okay. Autoimmune disorders is when the opposing forces in the body attack the body, trying to stop you from trying to release the demon itself, the opposing forces. Which is why some people do not get sick at all, because the opposing forces in the body does not allow the body to release unless it is really forced to. Some people do not survive that situation. The indicator of an autoimmune disorder is the lack of sickness that person experiences despite their exposure to diversity. It is when they have a diagnosis, when the body tries to purge out that demon, and that person stops the body from doing that. Which is why they are on medications all the time, keeping that demon within until the body cannot host that demon anymore, and that is a mutually assured destruction within the body. Okay? And so I know, in my world, someone I know has an autoimmune disorder today. When I had chickenpox, I had them all over my body. When they had the chickenpox, 1 chickenpox on the belly, and that was it. I was mostly sick as a kid. The other person was not sick, hardly at all. And then they get diagnosed in their 30s of an autoimmune disorder. And I had a diagnosis myself, but I couldn't diagnose it officially because it wasn't recognized. But I had the PMDD starting in 1999. And that was around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier than that person's diagnosis of whatever that they had. So my diagnosis actually came earlier. I was always sick as a kid. And then I had that PMDD that no one recognized. Okay? And so, yeah, when someone does not get sick at all, they have a beast within that's shutting down their immune system from releasing, has taken over. And it's just a matter of time before the energy changes, and then that beast finally takes over. Which is why then morgue people still see bodies jumping around, because that beast that killed that person is still alive in the body. And that's fucking crazy. And so if you are concerned about the VACCINESs and you're using remedies, or not concerned about the VACCINESs taking them, you should be staying home, staying safe, wearing a mask, and staying away from everyone in a room with a filter, only allowing a small amount of microbes in your environment. The train left the station. That's too late. That scenario will never, ever, it's not even a reality. And so Blood type compatibilities and incompatibilities have to do with fast-moving growth and antibody production converting into antigen attacking the person. And so transfusions have their own laws of compatibility based upon the frequency and speed of growth. Okay? And so let me just explain this. And so when you're doing a blood transfusion and you can't mix blood types, it would cause then the body to cause the blood to react to develop antibodies. So you can't have a blood type A blood transfusion to a O, because that O would have to develop so many antibodies to protect itself, and that would cause then obviously, clogs and clots and whatever. Okay, but when you are in mixed company and you are O positive or O negative, you have the ability to develop antibodies through a very a systematic way, because you have checks and balances and mitigating factors that allow you to be able to handle taking on life systematically. Okay, so which is why it's optimal to be blood type O, positive or negative, whatever. But you also have to release those demons as well without compromising yourself. Those who are A and B don't have the antibody protection, which is why they're at deficit, why they were recommended all these different therapies. And they have the opposite effect. Okay? Being around O's might give them half protection, because if you are an A and you have antigen A but you don't have any B or A antibodies, then someone who is O will have A antigen that you don't have no protection for. And so that's the thing, is that even though all the compatibilities, whether it's something that's blood or in the presence of, or even in a marriage, there's 3 different sets of rules. Okay, when it comes to blood types, 3 different sets of rules that are not necessarily the same. What is it? And so blood types, there's one rule for transfusions, another rule for being in the presence of, when you're spitting out antigen, and then there is another rule for marriages. And then you have to look at the environment too. How fast is the environment causing replication? So when you have 2 blood types that are the same, they're supposed to be like marriage compatibility, but they both are antigen to each other with no antibody protection. They're just taking each other down, maybe slowly, in a slow frequency, and that's the old couple that's on the porch swing, growing old together. Or they're in the hospital, dying from a disease together because they've given each other antigen that they have no antibody for, so they're both in the hospital holding hands together, dying together. But blood types, compatibility has 3 sets of rules. And if you don't understand those factors, in those situations, whether it's transfusion or in the presence of or a marriage, and that's too much for some people to get. And I get it, but I picked it apart. I'm not going to read all this because it's like, fuck, it's so crazy. All right, and so if you can release overexpressed antibodies turning into an antigen via sickness and food and release, then why couldn't a person who is full of antigen take on substance and convert the antigen into antibodies? And so taking on infection, releasing infection is a process of blood type management, and also potentially a blood type conversion process that probably should be managed by a doctor if you're unfamiliar. Okay? And it's hard to resist Gaia love mothers, father spells. It's also hard to resist hot chicks and chucks. Just remember the system programming you to bow down to those types. And also your family members. Okay, queen bees and king bees. Okay, so much. All right, I'm almost done. Jeez, God, that's a lot. Yeah, I had a lot to say. Queen bees and king bees need minions to be their sacrificial lambs and destroy anyone who challenges their position. Okay? Which is why I'm king and queen to myself. No family, only marriage to an equal, and I have room to change. No king bee or queen bee shoving me to the ground, telling me via passive-aggressive means or comments to quit evolving and changing or love bombing me. I have the freedom to evolve without asking the king or queen for permission. And so millennials and boomers develop queen bee and king bee situations, and many Gen X fall under the spells. which is why some Gen X who have not been tainted by the spells might be able to rise above, and another Gen X will play the game of millennials and boomers playing God. I see it, and the boomers and millennials are hard to resist. Shaking their asses or using their Gaia love mother spells on people are hard to resist. So I just stay on my own. I still appreciate diversity, but I know the drill. I know what boomers and millennials are programmed to do. We're programmed to do. Which is why some Gen X raised by silent gens might have a chance, but Gen X raised by boomers turn into millennials, bowing down to sex and wisdom. Just watch your Facebook. It's in all politics, religion, and science. Activism. If I had a lot of friends and a group of people I hung out with all the time, I could never say this, okay? I'd be too afraid to offend them. That's the jail of friends and family and group of people you must bow down to. So you think being silent is confidence. No, you're just in a jail. You can't speak and you have no freedom of speech because you might offend somebody in your circle of people who will ice you out and take away resources that you depend upon. That's why those who are not very self-sufficient or in jail, they can't afford the freedom offered to them. Which is why people like me are hated because of jealousy, or people using passive-aggressive behaviors mocking you behind your back. Yes, freedom is not free. You pay dearly to be free. Okay? And so I would rather be the king or queen to nobody than bowing down to somebody, some king or queen bee who says they're somebody, which is why I do not run in packs or groups of, or cater to a following of people. I will challenge everyone diplomatically on my Facebook, which is why I have no children, no pets. I do not need to be king or queen of some lesser being. If you choose to, okay, but more power to you. At least you know why I do not. And I married my equal, and I adapted to my environment, my marriage, and my government. My government will always change, and I will adapt to all changes, large and small. And again, natural, holistic, allopathic medicine. It is a sin against life. Everything is in plain sight. All from the Middle Ages, middle of life. Medicine is a sin against life, period. Now you know why people are dying suddenly, or aging, or fighting cancers. The system told you, are telling you in the words. Don't get mad at me. I've been trying to tell you forever, Jesus. The Catholic Church already told you, which is why drugs, alcohol are bad, because, hey, everyone will make their own choices. Okay? So that's all I'm going to say. But everything is in plain sight. And so, yeah, good luck.